What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Alpha Girl Confidence Podcast. This is episode 255, and it is my first interview back in over 9 months. So I'm so excited to share this conversation with Juliet Starrett, who is the founder and CEO of The Ready State. She's an author, a 3-time world champion in whitewater paddling, and the mom of 2 girl athletes. So having this conversation just reinstilled in me my love for podcasting and my love for interviewing amazing people like Juliet. And I'm pretty sure that you're going to feel the same way after you listen to this conversation. We dove into her main passion and purpose, which is all about movement, helping people to move more. So you're going to get a lot of great tips and ideas of how you can move more in your daily life, no matter who you are. And then we also talked a lot about the youth sports industry, the youth sports landscape, the difficult things, the things that we need to do better, and also some tips around the recruiting landscape. So I'm so excited for you to listen to this episode. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Juliet. What's up, Juliet? Welcome to the podcast. As I was just saying off recording, that this is my first interview back in like 9 months. So excited that you're on. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So yeah, tell us, let's just dive right in with a little bit of an intro, who you are, what you do, and kind of what you're about, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. First of all, I'm stoked to be here with you, Shay. So thanks for having me. And I'm honored that I'm, one of the first ones back after your little hiatus. So thanks for having me. I am Juliet Starrett. I have had what might seem like a career that has a lot of right turns, but for me, there's a pretty clear through line between all those things. But I was a professional whitewater paddler. I'll go back a little more. I was a rower in high school and then a Division I rower in college. And then I transitioned into being a professional whitewater paddler in my 20s. I took a bit of a right turn and I practiced law for a little while, but I kind of went back to my passion for sports and movement. My husband and I owned one of the first CrossFit gyms in the world. We opened it in 2025 before anyone knew what CrossFit was.
You mean 2005?
Sorry, not 2025.
Because I was going to say, wow,
that's
you
in the
lived
future. Man, I'm like way ahead. No, 2005. And then amid that, and I can tell that story later if it makes sense, we started our second company, which began as, the original name was Mobility WOD. And then we rebranded it to The Ready State in 2019. But what we do is help people learn how to move well, take care of their bodies, solve their own aches and pains. And then we've sort of expanded that conversation to include things like nutrition and sleep and overall performance, and sort of dabbled a bit in like the longevity space. We wrote a book last year called Built to Move, which was our first foray into kind of stepping out of like maybe a more niche like sports and athletic world and trying to bring more people into the conversation about like how awesome it is to have a body that feels good and be able to move into, now and as you age. So that was a real high level, but that's a starting place.
No, I mean, I was just telling you, like, I was just visiting my family in Utah, and I don't know if this is I guess it's a good thing for me, but a lot of times when I visit my family, and I see my aging grandparents and stuff like that and how they move, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, it's just another testament to how important it is to take care of your body. Like, I want to be able to walk. Like, one of my lifelong goals is to be able to walk as long as I want, as far as I want for, like, until I'm dead, basically. Right? Like, I just want to be able to explore life, and like the way that we explore and experience life is through these bodies. So it's like, let's take care of them, right? Which is,
oh my God,
so huge.
The best analogy I've ever heard on this point is someone told me, imagine at birth, your kids give you input, whatever your dream car is. So let's say your dream car is a Ferrari. Like, your parents gift you a Ferrari, and then they say, hey, Shay, this is the only car you're going to have for your entire life. You get one car, right? So think about how people take care of their cars that they maybe have tops for 10 years, right? You change your oil, you take it to get it washed. I think if we thought of our bodies as like this one-time gift we have. And then the other quick story I'll tell you is we're lucky enough to live in a place where we can quickly get into open space and
sure.
hike on trails. And I run into this guy a lot, and I stopped him and I said, "Hey, I'm sorry, can I ask you, like, I see you out here every day. Do you mind if I ask, like, how old are you?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm 84. And so anytime I run into older people out and about doing something physical, I like to stop them, ask them how old they are. You'd be surprised to learn they don't mind, because they're stoked, because they're
they're like,
yeah, they're stoked because they know that it's awesome that they're out there at their age doing whatever they're doing. So I like to ask how old you are, and
right.
you know, like, what's your secret? And this guy says to me, and I'd passed him a bunch of times on the trail, and I was like, what is up with that guy? And he said, well, ever since I retired at 65, I walk 6 miles a day, rain, shine, whatever. I walk 6 miles a day, and that's my secret. You know, and what I've noticed that through a lot of people like this I talk to, and then just in my own bigger research, is, you know, that's a common theme for people who are doing well in their later years, is they just have been moving a lot.
Right.
And, you know, my own personal mission, if I have one, is to help inspire people to move more in ways that make sense to them. I mean, that is really what I'm all about. And I'm super agnostic about how that is. I mean, I think sometimes people hear that I have this CrossFit background and fear that I'm going to be like an aggro CrossFit person.
Right.
And I like CrossFit, and I still do some CrossFit-ish training these days. And I like to lift weights, but man, I don't care how people move. I mean, you know, whether that's dance or martial arts or hiking or walking your dog. I mean, I really don't care. I don't think there's a perfect way to do it. I just think we all need to be moving a lot.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And like you said, like, I think a lot of people think move more. It's like, oh, I don't have time to move more. I don't have time to go to the gym. And like, the huge thing for me is like, you don't have to have a place or a teacher or a coach to move more. Like, you should be able to move more anywhere, whether that be at your home, in your backyard, on an airplane. Like, there's always ways to move, right? And so like, let's kind of get real practical here. And this is obviously, this conversation is like, it's for the girl athletes, but it's also for the parents, right? Like, just general health, and we'll get into like the mindset and stuff like that too. But for right now, like, what are some very simple ways that anybody listening can like just move more in their daily life if they're a mom of, you know, 14 kids and have 14 different practices to get to? And bless your heart if you have 14 kids.
Yeah, bless your heart. I mean, really. So, I mean, I'll start by doing a slight challenge, and that is that the data shows that every American, regardless of socioeconomic level, is spending 3 hours a day watching television. And that's apart from being on their phones and other devices. So I would like to say that people probably do have a little bit of time, and I get it. I understand if you've had a busy day, you know, making breakfast, lunch, dinner, working all day, coming home, homework, bed, bath, whatever, by 9 p.m., the moment you do have time to move, the last thing you want to do is move. I get that. So, you know, being mindful of that, I would say the number one piece of advice I have is to encourage people to figure out ways to just walk more.
Yeah.
I am like a walking evangelist. Like, it's really hard. I'm trying to make walking cool, and I've been trying to make walking cool for like 10 years on Instagram, and it's, you know, I'll say it's not the easiest thing. It's way easier to have like shredded abs
totally.
You know, be pushing some kind of weird supplement. Like, that's more successful. But nevertheless, I just chip away over here saying, man, like, forget about any fitness trend you hear, any technical thing. Man, if we all just walked more. And the thing that I like to say to people is that the question I would ask, I'll ask you, Shay, if you could take a drug that would reduce your all-cause mortality by 51%, would you take it?
Yes.
And that drug is walking 8,000 steps a day.
Right.
And it goes up to 61% reduction in all-cause mortality if you walk 12,000 steps a day. So what I love about the 8,000 step number, and we put that in our book, Built to Move in particular, because everyone gets stuck on this 10,000 steps. And I think what happens with that is that people are like, I am too busy, and 10,000 steps seems impossible to get, and I don't have time to go for a 90-minute walk or whatever it would take to get 10,000 steps. So what the default is, they don't do anything. What I love about 8,000 steps is, in my own practice, I've learned that it really is possible to accumulate 8,000 steps in a bunch of small ways. And, the way I do it, for example, is I do exercise a few times a week in the morning. At the end of my workout, I take a 10-minute walk. I try to take walking meetings with my staff whenever I can and when we don't have to be on Zoom. I take 10 or 20-minute walks after each one of my meals. We're fortunate enough to have a dog. Our dog has to be walked, so we walk our dog. But I find that without ever having to consciously go out for a long walk, I'm easily able to accumulate 8,000 steps. And then the other thing I'd say for parents, and I made a ton of videos about this, having spent myself so much time, my oldest daughter played club volleyball for a while and then switched to water polo, and my younger daughter's a major water polo player. So I'm probably all these parents listening to this, someone asked me what my hobbies are recently on a podcast, and I was like, well, my hobby is I'm a water polo spectator. That's what I do. So I'm in it, I'm driving around doing the things. I spend my whole Saturday. I'm orphaned at some pool in Palo Alto for the entire day with nowhere to go. And so that's my life. But what I've been trying to encourage parents to do is walk, because guess what? Here's how a water polo tournament goes for me. I drive all the way down to Palo Alto for an hour. I drop my kid off, but she has to be there an hour early. So rather than going to the coffee shop or setting up my lawn chair, I drop her off to go warm up at the pool. And guess what? All these pools are at a high school. There's usually a track. And if there's not a track, there's a neighborhood. So I literally just kick my kid out of the car, put in my headphones, and I just walk around random neighborhoods, walk around the track if there is one. Same thing in between games. Sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 hour breaks, so I'll help my kid get some food, and then I just walk around. And it's been fun because now I've got this cadre of other parents who love to join me. So they pull up and get out of the car now. And there's this group of 5 or 6 other parents I've known for 5 years, and they get out of the car and they're like, should we walk now? Right. And that's all just because I started years ago saying, hey, we're not all going to sit here in our cars on our phones or on the, on sitting on some uncomfortable bench in the pool. So I really think we could save the world and everyone's health with walking. Walking.
And that's a win-win for the parents, but also for the kids, because if my dad would have not watched practice and just walked instead, I would have had so much less pressure on me. I don't know very many kids maybe young kids, but a little bit older kids that want their parents to watch them practice. Most don't. No. So it's let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and you get your walk in and let your kids do their thing.
Yeah, and I will say that it saves us from our worst instinct, because look,
totally.
I joined the Positive Coaching Alliance on their National Leadership Council. I am very well versed in what you are and aren't supposed to do as a parent. But I'll say, as a competitive person and a former athlete myself, it's hard to not be oh my God. To say it's you really have to do a lot of self-checking. And guess what? If I'm not in there watching the practice or the warm-up, it's a lot easier to self-check any instinct I have to tell my kid to do something, which is, comical because I never played water polo. I don't know anything about water polo. So I honestly have literally nothing to contribute. But, to the extent that I have a low moment, I just take myself out, let my kid warm up, get ready for her game, do whatever she wants without, eagle eye mom on the pool deck. And then I just saunter in when the game starts, and that's it. But anytime, I have this rule for myself, anytime there's a game or a tournament, 15,000 steps, that's my goal.
That's awesome.
And I usually can get it, and I'm not trying that hard. I just walk in before and in between games. That's all I do.
And that's obviously something very practical for sports parents, right? And another thing too is something that I do is if I'm going to the store, anywhere I go, I just park a little bit further. Right? I don't need to find the closest spot, just parking further. Taking the stairs, that's a crazy one. It's crazy, right? When you're at an airport or something, there's nobody.
No, you're always the only one.
The only one on the stairs. And those are just such simple things. If you do it for a long time, are going to make a big difference,
Yeah, I do the exact same thing. I travel a lot too, and I was in an airport taking the stairs, and I was the only one, and I was carrying my carry-on, which was not very heavy, it was a suitcase, and some lady's wow, you're so strong, and I literally was shocked, because I was wait, I'm just carrying this little 20-pound. Yeah, I'm going up the stairs carrying this 20-pound carry-on, this is not, to me, this was not a thing, and I was recently in Europe, and I've had a few interesting experiences in European airports. And apart from the fact that they're probably, some of them, like the Frankfurt airport, definitely not ADA compliant because, it's not the US.
Right.
Man, the amount of stairs. I mean, I got off my plane with my carry-on in Frankfurt and had to hike up like 20 stairs and then down 20 stairs to this other bus and hike here and there. And I thought to myself, man, the Americans would not fare well in this airport because there's no escalators. There's stairs everywhere. You got to hoof your baggage up and down the stairs. And, it was just it was a different world.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, we definitely most people wouldn't do well in that kind of situation, right?
One other thing too, before you ask me another thing, the thing about parking far away that I love is that usually when you have to do that, it's because like you're going to a place that you don't love going that much. In my case, Costco.
Yes.
I find that to be an excruciating experience on multiple levels. I have friends who like it. I don't understand. I don't enjoy going there, but that's where we get our toilet paper, so I go there. And I find I literally park so far away. I don't interact with people. I don't wait for parking spaces. I just am in my own little universe. And so it sounds silly, but from a mental health perspective and like a life joy, just parking way far away. Gosh. So in addition to getting some movement, I'm like not having to have negative interactions with humanity around parking. And it makes my whole experience of going to Costco more joyful, if that's possible. So, it's all the things.
It's so funny. Like one of my biggest pet peeves in life is when I'm like driving with someone and they're like driving around trying to find the closest spot. I'm like, yo, just go over there. There's no one over there. Like, can we just the mental health thing is just a lot easier instead of trying to fight someone for like the closest parking spot.
Seriously.
I love that. So we talked a little bit about this, like, a couple months or whenever we talked before this, but like there's so much crap on social media with fitness influencers and like so much just stuff that's not true or that's just way too complicated. Like, I would just love to hear from you. Like, what are some of the dumbest trends, I guess, that you see on social media that we want to like rip apart real quick?
Oh my God. I mean, man, there are so many. Where do we begin, Shay? But I mean, I think I kind of alluded to, I'll start with a couple that just immediately popped to mind. I think the first thing I think of is this whole transformation idea, and that the idea that, looking like the Wolverine is the ideal body and that's what we should all shoot for. That is not true or doesn't make sense for like 99% of people. And in fact, if you actually talk to, I forget the actor's name who plays Wolverine, but when he actually talks about what it takes to look like that, it's gnarly.
Yeah. It's like a full-time job, I'm sure.
It's a full-time job. So there's an infographic article that an organization called Precision Nutrition put out years ago that I think anybody should go search for on the internet who's watching this. And it's called The Cost of Getting Lean. And it shows what it takes to look certain ways. And those people who look super shredded on the internet and have 7% body fat, it shows what the trade-offs are to be that. And the trade-offs are, you don't go out to dinner with your friends. The trade-offs are your social life is completely stunted. You eat a different dinner than your own kids. You training 7 or 8 days a week. Like your whole, to look like that, that's what you do. That's your life. And there's a massive amount of trade-off. And what I love about that infographic is I think when I've showed it to people, they look at it and they're like, oh yeah, I'm fine at 20% body fat because I like to go out to dinner with my friends and I want to be able to enjoy dinner with my own kids. And they realize that there's actually the cost of looking the way that we've put on internet as the ideal is too big, and most people don't actually care. Most people just want to feel good and be healthy, and they don't really care about being shredded. So I think the idea that being shredded equals being healthy is a myth.
Yeah.
That's a myth. That doesn't mean being healthy. And often those people aren't healthy because they fractured their relationships, their mental health isn't good, there probably is some underlying disordered eating going on. So what you see in the imagery doesn't often reflect what's really going on, which is not healthy. But that's what we've put up on the internet as healthy, is like shredded bodies. So I'd say that's number one. And then I think number two, while I do think, and actually just wrote an article that's going to go up on our blog soon, that there are some good supplements people should be taking. that are well studied and are good in particular for women. And I talk about what I take and what I don't take. But I do think the supplement universe is out of control.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's out of control. And, I think people are spending a massive amount of money on supplements, as is evidenced by the fact that there's 1 billion companies who seem to be doing really well. I mean, I don't know if you followed the whole Liver King thing, but that was an awful example of what can go south with supplements.
For sure.
And, the reality is that, a lot of supplements, because there's no regulation, actually aren't what they say they are. So you could spend a bunch of money buying what you think is ashwagandha when really it's just dust in a pill or whatever. So I think,
or something.
I think there's a lot of misinformation. And I think underlying it is still and I think this is going to be true forever because we're humans, is that we're always looking for a quick fix.
Oh, the magic pill. Yeah.
We're always looking for the magic pill. And unfortunately, it's not in the form of supplements.
Yeah.
I do think there are some ways that we can add some supplementation to our life to make things a little easier and better and maybe improve a bit. But, for most people, just eating good food is probably enough.
Right.
And that's the first step. So I would say that I think this sort of body image ideal and the Wild West that is the out of control supplement market are two of the fitness trends that bother me the most. Now, I have to add on a third.
Let's do it.
Especially because you probably have some moms listening to this podcast and people who have jobs. Yep. This seems to have calmed down. Maybe this is 4 years ago, but there was a trend where there were a lot of male influencers and male fitness influencers who were talking extensively about these insane morning routines they were doing, where they were waking up at 4 and they were journaling, and then they were ice bathing and sauning, and then they were meditating, and then they were doing yoga, and then they were, like red light therapying their genitals, and they were doing all this other stuff. And I remember feeling so mad about this because I'm like, dude, I wake up and I'm lucky to shoot an espresso shot before I'm making breakfast for my kids, making lunch, making sure they have their books for school, getting out the door, giving a ride to school. And then maybe on a good day, I make myself some oatmeal before I leave the house. That's my morning as a working mom. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think that whole trend, while it might work for some people, it just made a lot of people feel bad because they're like, I can't do any of those things. And if I can't do any of those things, then either they feel like they suck or they're unhealthy or whatever. Yeah, or they lack discipline, none of which is true. Yeah. We all are trying to navigate these busy lives, and if you've got kids in the mix, it's a little crazier. So I think that is a trend that did a lot of not good for people's mental health.
Yeah, and the other thing too is what works for one person may not work for the other person. And that's true of fitness, that's true of food. It's you can't just copy and paste, someone else's life and assume it's going to work for your life because we're completely different, right? And we don't know what each other what is going on in each other's life. So it's find what works for you. For me, it's I meditate for at least 10 minutes and I go outside, and either hang out with the dog, do some gardening, whatever, it's just find what works for you. And most of the time, when it comes to fitness, morning routines, food, I think simple is most of the time, maybe not always. I mean, I feel like always is a big word, but always better.
Yeah. I think, oh my God. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I have this, can I tell you about this base camp idea I have? So I'm obsessed with Mount Everest things.
Me too. Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
K2.
Yeah. If there's it doesn't matter how crappy the movie is or documentary on Netflix, if it's about Everest or any climbing thing, I'm into it. Same. Of course we read Into Thin Air and then watched every single movie documentary. And what's weird about it is I literally have no interest in, even though I'm sporty, no interest in climbing Everest whatsoever. Absolutely but I somehow am enthralled with Everest. I'm fascinated by it. And what I see in our space is kind of two sets of people. So Everest Base Camp is, where you go to get ready for Everest. People are there for months. They acclimate at Everest Base Camp and they actually climb up and down, spend some time there. So I see there's this one set of people who, in my view, have skipped Everest Base Camp and they're climbing the Khumbu Icefall. Yeah, those are the people that are taking 50 supplements, red light therapying, and journaling. But they forgot to eat any vegetables. They sleep 5 or 6 hours a night. Yeah. They don't move enough. And to me, those people, like, they forgot to acclimate at base camp by doing the most fundamental fundamental basic practices. And then meanwhile, you have like a whole other subset of people who are stuck down in Kathmandu. They can't even get to base camp for the exact reasons we've been talking about. They're totally overwhelmed. Yeah. They're like, should I intermittent fast? Wait, should I be on the Mediterranean diet? And wait, should I do HIIT training? But now Stacy Sims says that Orange Theory is bad, but I love Orange Theory. And now this, right? So like there's this whole other, and then those people often just do nothing because they're like, okay,
totally,
like I give up. I'm a mortal human. There's no way I can do all these things. And so it's like, my goal is to try to help those people in Kathmandu, like, see through the madness, get to base camp, and help those people who have decided they're special and think they can skip base camp, bring them back to base camp and say, hey, you know, you got to earn your supplements and your red light therapy by eating vegetables and sleeping. And I really do. I would even go so far as to say always. I mean, always the basics work. And the basics are things we already know. Everybody knows. They don't need an influencer to tell them that they should eat some fruits and vegetables and some protein and try to get as much sleep as you can and walk a lot. Like, those things actually work. And I think the only thing we're not doing is, and I love it, like what I'm trying to get everybody to do is those basics with radical consistency. The people I know who are the healthiest, they're not really doing anything super special. They're just doing this basic stuff over and over and over and over and over and over again.
I think if there's one key or secret, that's the secret, right? Is just consistency.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. And the people I know that are like the best athletes and the most healthy, they fall off the wagon. They're like, you know, eating in and out on their road trip. And I mean, right, there's just, everybody is going to have, nobody's doing this experiment of being a human and having human health perfectly. No one. And I really do believe in the 80-20 rule. You know, the people I know that are consistent with those basic habits 80% of the time seem to be doing the best.
I love how you call it a human experiment, because it really, like, life is just this big experiment.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I think I really want to, like, double click on what you said about, it's like, unfortunately, there's no one size fits all. You know, even when it comes to diet, I do think there's no one size fits all. I do think a fair bit of experimentation makes sense to, like, what feels good for your body, what feels well for you, what you can eat, what you can't eat, what kind of person you are, you know. Like, I'm kind of the person where, like, if I eat dessert a lot of nights, then I want to eat dessert every single night. So it's actually, for me, kind of better to just, like, not eat dessert. Fair enough. And I also have a friend who I totally can't relate to, who she's, like, so disciplined. She can eat, like, 1 square of dark chocolate every night. And she's like, I'm good. And I was like, dude, if I had that, I'd, like, eat the entire bar of dark chocolate. So I have, you know, I have learned. Yeah, I have learned that, like, I have to curb myself in certain ways, that I'm not going to be a 1 square of dark chocolate kind of person. But I think everybody needs to do a little bit of that experimenting. And I think in order to do that, you sort of have to cast aside the influencers and all the noise and try some things, see what makes you feel good, what makes you feel like you can be, you know, clear-headed at work and in your exercise, and then stick with that consistently forever.
Yeah, because when you follow, like, everything you see on social media, you're just dabbling in everything. Okay, I did this for 2 weeks, didn't work. I did this for 2 weeks, didn't work. Like, of course nothing's going to work, and then it's going to create so much confusion. And that's not just for, like, nutrition, fitness influencers, but I think that's just, like, across the board social media. Like, stop, like, going so superficial and, like, trying all these different things. Like, can you commit to a practice and, like, really see it through? You know what I mean? Yeah, I agree. I agree. So I love that. I want to transition a little bit to the mindset part of it. Like, obviously training your body is huge, right? We just spent the last however many minutes talking about that. But I want to know for you personally, as, you know, a former, like, world champion, and even now as a mom and a business owner, like, how do you, like, train your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for me, training my mind is super connected to training my body, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I find that if I am if I've been able to move enough and exercise and sleep well and sort of follow these basic practices we've been talking about, I have so much more mental capacity for all things, for my relationship with my husband, with my kids, for showing up for work clear-headed and be able to, and being able to be creative and manage people well and not be an asshole and
Right.
all those things. So I do think it's, for me, super connected to my physical health. So I would start there.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
Yeah. And then I think, I'm a big fan of practicing resilience, because I think life throws hard things at literally everyone, whether it's, loss or disease or stress or, you name it. There's innumerable challenges that we all have as humans that we're going to have to figure out how to face those things.
Yeah.
And I think if we don't ever practice that, those things can become catastrophic for us from a mental health perspective. And so one of the things that I do, and this is just my own way of doing it, and I started doing this like 10 years ago, is that I try to do 3 hard things every year, things that make me uncomfortable, and I'm very intentional about it. And I'll give you the example of 2024. And I obviously am an athlete, so I'm drawn to physical pursuits in terms of doing things that are uncomfortable, but not always physical. And it 100%, if anyone wants to try this, it does not need to be physical. So in 2024, I was invited by my friend Rebecca Rush, who happens to be like a 500 million time world champion mountain biker. And, someone who, like, for us mere mortals is afraid to mountain bike with. And she called me up and said, hey, I want to take you in the winter in Arizona on this 5-day bike packing trip. We're going to carry all our stuff on our bikes and bike 250 miles. And my initial reaction when I got the call was like, I really do not want to do that. That sounds terrible, right? Like, that sounds awful. And then I kind of corrected myself and I thought, first of all, what an amazing opportunity to go learn from one of the best. But then secondarily, like, this fits exactly into the kind of thing that I'm trying to I'm trying to do things to make myself uncomfortable. And man, did it work. I ended up loving the trip, but it was also really hard. And, mountain biking 50 miles a day with all my stuff on my bike, sleeping outside with no tent, waking up in the morning, with my whole sleeping bag covered in ice, it was a lot.
That's hard.
It was hard. And then the second thing that I did is that I am on a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of speaking on panels, but I don't do as much just speaking by myself on a stage. Yeah. So that was one of my goals for 2024. And one of the reasons it's one of my goals is that I get a little more nervous doing that. I'm more in this type of environment on a panel. I'm super comfortable. It's like totally within my zone. Yeah. But getting up with my own PowerPoint alone on stage and trying to captivate an audience of 500 people is outside my comfort zone.
For most people, that would be the
it's
last
really
thing
scary.
they'd want to do, right?
Yeah, like it's really scary. And so, so this year I started working with a speaking consultant, and then I did a big solo talk at the Outside Festival in June on a stage by myself with like a PowerPoint and everything. And, I still think I got a lot of work to do to get really good at that. I will say one other thing that made it even more challenging is I went right after Diana Nyad.
Oh, dude.
And she...
That's awesome. You're like, good luck following that.
Yeah, Diana is like a legend of a human and a public speaker. She brings a trumpet onto stage and is trumpeting partway through her presentation, which sounds weird, but it like totally fits in and it makes it all the more entertaining. Yeah, so that was the other thing. And then the third thing I'm doing in 2024 is I was, as I mentioned, a Division I rower at Berkeley as a young person. And I was invited this year to join an alumni boat to go row the head of the Charles in October. So I am rowing, and I've only recently learned that 3 of the people, they're all Cal alumni, but 3 of the people in my boat are former Olympians. And they're all like 6'500", and I'm by far the smallest person in the boat and the oldest. Yeah. So I'm trying to train up for that. So that's cool. That's just for me from a mental health perspective. Yeah. I got breast cancer in 2018, and a lot of people said, man, you seem to like really bounce back from that quickly, like physically and mentally. And I'm not going to lie. I went through some dark times, and it was very stressful. Yeah. But I do think that I was able to, kind of manage it and manage my stress well, because I, have this background as an athlete. I think you learn to manage stress as an athlete. And then I've really been trying to like practice these moments of discomfort in my life, so that when real, not like fake, fake discomfort I've created for myself comes about, I actually think it works. I think it really helps me be able to manage those difficult times better. So those are kind of my two strategies.
Do you kind of pre-plan those as it like the year ahead, or does it kind of just come and it's like, okay, this is going to be my one of 3 hard things?
I mean, they've mostly just kind of landed in my lap. But other times, if I see, I'm like, okay, I don't really have anything on the horizon. Like, I'll just sign up for a Spartan race or something like that.
Something like that. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it can, and I can think of 1,000 ways you can make yourself uncomfortable. I mean, even if as small as like, you don't like to exercise but you want to, so you go to a class. And I know what that's like, the first time you go to a class, or like you feel uncomfortable and you're like, oh, that weird human feeling, or like, are people going to accept me, and am I going to suck and whatever. To me, like for that wouldn't make me uncomfortable because I'm a gym person, but like that would make a lot of people really uncomfortable. Or for a lot of women who've never lifted weights, like setting foot into a gym where there's weightlifting, like I'm just saying it doesn't need to be a physical pursuit. It can be 1,000 mental pursuits. Anything you want to learn, learning a language, trying something new, traveling to a place that's a little off the beaten path. I mean, I think there's so many ways that we can kind of get ourselves out of this kind of comfort situation in our lives and try something new. And I really do think it like really helps build resilience.
Yeah, I mean, even like little daily things. Like I'm thinking back to this summer, it was like 112 or 110 or something over here in Sacramento. And I went and like, I'm not saying to do this, but I just went and worked out outside for like 15 minutes. And I'm like, I don't want to do this, but I just know I'll be super uncomfortable and I'm going to be hot. And I'm just like, that was one little tiny thing that I did just to be uncomfortable. It wasn't for the workout necessarily, just like I want to make myself uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if you've read Michael Easter's book, The Comfort Crisis.
That's one of my all-time favorite books. And I was actually going to bring him up when you were talking about it.
Highly recommend. We actually just had him on our podcast
I saw that.
in July talking about his other book, The Scarcity Brain. But I love The Comfort Crisis, and I really think he's onto something with that, right? Like left to our own devices, we're in our super comfortable chair in our air-conditioned homes. Absolutely. We're heated homes. We barely ever go outside. We have DoorDash delivered to our homes. Like we've really made this sort of environment where we're like cushy. Extremely comfortable. And I do think if that's how we live our lives, when uncomfortable things happen to us, which they will to everyone, we're ill-equipped to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually his book, after I read The Comfort Crisis the first time, that's when I took my first backpacking trip. And I was like, after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a backpacking trip. I've never done it. Like it was only a one-day thing, but it's just something I've never done. So I went on that trip, and then now it's like a kind of an annual thing for me and my brother. So it's just like, and it's obviously it's not a misogi, so to say, where I'm like having, I mean, I could die out there for sure, but just something a little bit uncomfortable. You feel so good after you do it too.
You really do. That just even the process of saying yes to doing, even kind of, because I'm one of those people, like I do what I say I'm going to do. So like for me, saying yes is a big deal, because if I say it, even if I like change my mind and I'm like, oh God, I really don't want to do this, like I'm doing it. Like that's just how my personality is. But I even just think the process of saying yes just means that you're sort of like, okay, you've accepted, like, I'm going to take a little risk. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to try something new, do something that makes me uncomfortable. And, and again, it really, I mean, again, I just want to emphasize, because not everybody is as physical as I am. There's so many ways to do this that are not physical. Mm-hmm.
Even just like staring at a wall for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So we had this guy, we're going to try it in October, but we had this adventurer, I don't know if you've ever heard of, named Colin O'Brady on our podcast.
Oh yeah, and I love his book too.
Yeah,
I actually did his walk last year.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we're going to do that. And that's another thing we're doing in October. We're actually taking it as like a company holiday.
Oh, awesome.
And we're going to do the 12-hour walk, and we figured out from where we live in Marin County, we can walk from Marin County on kind of side roads all the way into San Francisco from where we are. And that it's supposed to take about 10 hours walking to get from here to there. And man, I mean, I already am like, oh shit, what am I going to do without my phone? And, I'm already like sort of processing a little bit like, oh my God, this is actually kind of a big deal that we're just going to, be out there, and we're going to try to leave in waves so that we don't run into each other out there in the world. And, so I don't know what to expect. Really cool. I mean, what was your experience? Like, did you do the full 12 hours?
No, mine was like 8. So I just went up. I live by the American River. So I just left my house, walked through Sac State campus, went to the river, and it was awesome. Towards the coming back, like my feet started to hurt, and like it was more of a kind of getting through it physically more than mentally for me. And I was just like, I have to get home. Like I brought my phone just to be safe, turned it on airplane mode. But it was awesome. Like when I got back home, I was like so proud of myself, because I've kind of had this narrative as a kid that I can't handle hard things, and that I can't push through like difficult things, physical, mental, whatever. And so that kind of proved to myself that like, hey, you can push through this pain. You can do hard things. And I kind of did it to prove to myself that you can do something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I really like here. That's amazing. So I'll have to shoot you a message after we do it.
Yeah.
Because I think we're all looking forward to it, but we have those same level of nerves. Like all of us are like, I don't remember the last time I walked for 12 hours. And, we're all going to like take our phones, but turn them off in our backpacks. Yeah. And, we just don't know what the day will bring. And can we make it physically? I mean, there's a lot of unknowns, but I think that's what's part of the whole thing is and guess what? Like if we fail, it's not a big deal.
Right.
Because
call an Uber or something if you had to.
Yeah. I mean, the most important thing is that we like set out to do it, and we say yes, and we try to do something that makes us uncomfortable, and, take a moment to check out of technology. And it's, even if we only make it 5 hours, like that's still awesome.
Yeah. As long as you try, you know what I mean? Like that's the thing that stops people is like, just try.
Yeah. Just say yes.
Yeah.
Just say yes.
Yeah. Cool. We're going to take a big right turn here. And I want to talk about, the youth sports landscape a little bit. I know that you said you were, starting to work on a book around youth sports, which is obviously, the jam over here. Tell us, can you give us like, I don't know, like how far you are into the process, but can you give us like a little glimpse as to like what that book is going to be about, and like why you wanted to write a book about youth sports?
Yeah, I'll start with the why, I think, in that question. And I'll go back. I'll start with just the logistics. We're actually in the midst of writing a proposal and doing a lot of the research for the book right now. So it's pretty early phase. I think it's likely to come out in 2026 as books go, which seems like 1,000 years from now, but in the book world, that's like tomorrow. So that's, I think, when it's due to come out. But I think the why is that for years, my husband and I have been consulting with athletes and teams at every level. So professional teams, college teams, high school teams, even younger kids teams. We've been consulting at every level. And a constant refrain we hear, and let's say like we'll start at the highest level, like, we've been doing some consulting lately with the All Blacks, which is the New Zealand rugby team. And they're always like, I just wish that our athletes from college came knowing X or prepared to do Y or knowing how to do Z, right? And then we get to college and they're like, man, we could be so much more successful if the kids that were being brought up to us from high school knew how to do X or Y or Z. Yeah. And then we get to high school and, the high school coaches are like, man, our kids don't even have PE anymore. And, they're showing up and trying to learn how to play high school sports and they don't even know how to throw a ball. Right. And they're really lacking basic fundamental movement awareness and skill and mechanics awareness and skill. And so we started just like, this was a constant thing, right? From coaches at every level is like the kids are ill prepared for sport.
Right.
And then the secondary thing is that we're parents. We have a kid who's a high level water polo player. She's actually in the middle of college recruiting right now. So she's actively talking to coaches and going through this whole recruiting process. And we see a lot of the challenges of youth sports. We're in it. You know, we have things that have worked well for us, haven't worked well for us. We see how difficult it is. And then I also know the data that something like 70% of kids drop out of youth sports by age 13.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
So take all that together and combine it with Kelly and I really love sports. And we both believe that our own success in life and our ability to deal with challenge and our lifelong love of movement and exercise and focus on health is because we both did sports, you know, both as young people and beyond. And I also really am of the mind that sports are even more important today than even they were when I was a kid, because kids are on technology all the time. We're not moving less. You know, we're suffering from a comfort crisis, kids and adults alike. And so I think we're really motivated to really try to help parents in particular figure out how to navigate this youth sports landscape, and take the lesson of like one of the most important things I learned as an athlete, and I don't know whether you share this in your own athletic career, but one of the most important things I learned as an athlete is that you can only control what you can control.
Absolutely.
And I've taken that lesson like throughout my life, like control what you can control. And I think that's sort of the underlying theme we want to share with parents, is like control what you can control, and then telling them these are the things you can control.
For sure.
And you can better prepare your kid for the next level of sports if they're on that path. And you can also prepare your kid to have a more positive experience in sports, even if they have no further ambition, even if their sole goal is to play on the high school softball team, which is really, I mean, honestly, what 98% of kids are going to be doing is making it to high school sports. And that's awesome. And that's a great goal. And a lot of high schools, you know, are open to having kids start sports from the very beginning of high school, even if they don't have prior experience. And so we just really wanted to create a comprehensive resource for parents, that helps parents navigate this crazy process as youth sports, helps more kids stay in sports for longer, and then helps the kids who are going to advance in the next level be better prepared, you know, better prepared to show up for college, better prepared, you know, for those very extra few who go on to play professionally, be prepared for that. And a lot of the things that kids and parents need to be prepared for actually aren't athletics. You know, it's communication, nutrition, strength and conditioning, you know, like the mental game. There's so much of that. You know, usually what we hear from college coaches, for example, is like a lot of like one example is that a lot of kids are really good athletes but have no executive function, and that makes them. It's actually a real problem. Like if you're on a team, you need to be able to respond to email and be responsive and respond to communication and fill out the Google sheet that someone sends you and be able to manage a calendar and know when to show up. That has nothing to do with whether or not you're good at a sport.
Right.
And that's actually something parents can control. Parents can help. They can value that and help teach their kids, which doesn't just help them in sport. It helps them in life.
Well,
you know,
yeah,
so
I mean, that's the beauty of sports, is it is like a training, you know, for life.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so that's the book. We don't yet, our working title is Outplay. But we don't yet know. It's so early in the process, and there'll be a lot of people like publishers and, people will have a lot of say.
Will be in it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't wait for it to come out. Like,
we're really excited.
Yeah. Nice. As a sports parent, you know, currently in it, and, you know, have been through it with your oldest, like, what would you say is because I'm not a parent, so I love asking this question to parents that I have on the podcast, but what would you say for you personally was like one of the hardest things about, you know, being a sports parent and kind of navigating, you know, the landscape?
I think the most difficult thing is, you know, if you are like alive and on any social media, you've been hammered as a parent by articles that like sports specialization is bad, right?
Yeah.
And I agree it's bad, with a caveat that there's a lot of other issues also that don't ever get any attention, and we just focus on sports specialization.
Yeah.
And actually, there is a point in time, actually having a kid now that's, in the midst of college recruiting, there is a time when kids should sports
Absolutely.
specialize
Yeah.
if they are. But I think it's, even as a parent who knows deeply how important it is to not sports specialize, it's really hard to not get sucked into that with younger kids. And regardless of, it doesn't, because, there, and I think it's a systemic problem. Like, I'll give you an example. It's like, well, I maybe intellectually know I should like have my kid not do winter water polo because it's an 8-week session and it's not really that important for anything. But if I'm having a low moment, what I could think is, well, if I don't sign my kid up for winter water polo, and then spring water polo comes, which is like the major season, is my kid now not going to get chosen for the team because they didn't do winter water polo?
Yeah.
Right? Is my kid going to get punished for taking these obvious breaks? Taking time off? Is my kid going to get punished from just a sort of present standpoint? So I think that lingers for a lot of people, and certainly lingered for me in certain ways. The way that we've tried to manage that is, really when we have breaks, we really take them. And then we also, our daughter Caroline also does swim team, but that's so related. So she does take a break from water polo and does swim team, but we just try to do a lot of outdoor sports. That's the way we've managed it as a family. Yep. We still ski and we backpack and we hike and we do river trips. And so we've really tried to, like, that's how we haven't managed sports specialization by saying, okay, our kid does baseball, softball, water polo, and basketball. That's not how we've managed specialization. We can't, like, that would never work for us. No. But what we've done is do the level best we can to give her as many full breaks from water polo as we can. Sure. And then during those breaks and even during seasons, we're still skiing, backpacking, hiking, taking river trips. Like, we're just trying to be outside, going on our paddle boards, like biking. I mean, we just really try to, so that's been our way of managing it. But I will say it's hard. And it's easy to say on the outside, like, kids shouldn't sports specialize. And if you're on Instagram, you see that message 100,000 times. Definitely. It's easier said than done.
Well, that's the other thing that we were talking about at the very beginning. It's like someone telling you should or shouldn't do something, like they don't know what your life is. Like, you can't just take that blanket advice. But I love the way you've done it. And my family kind of did the same, where we were a pretty outdoorsy family. We'd go hiking a lot, boating, stuff like that. I think that, and not to say that it's better, but I personally like that way better than doing soccer, basketball, softball, right? It's like, let's get outside in nature, which is so good for you physically, mentally, resilience, all those kinds of things. Like, let's kind of do these, outdoor adventure type sports in addition to, water polo, swimming, and that kind of thing. And I think that's a way that a lot of people probably don't look at it, but like, you can add in those things, it doesn't just have to be your typical like sports, right?
Oh yeah, I think so. And honestly, in some ways, that sounds more like we're talking about, like, Jonathan Haidt, I think is his name, just wrote that book, The Anxious Generation. Yeah. Great book, by the way. So I don't know that kids and parents need more organized sports. No. It's expensive. It's time consuming. You're traveling for tournaments. There's just a lot going on there. So it's like, I don't know that we need to add in other sports.
I agree.
I think we need to figure out ways to take some dedicated time off. And then I think we just need to be conscious that our kid is moving their bodies in other ways. Yeah. And man, the sky's the limit there. Exactly. Like, it does not need to be, you have to sign up for a whole other sport and commit to that. Like, that just seems like too many things.
Yeah, there needs to be a little bit more, freedom of movement and just, less organization and rules and coaches and stuff like that. And that also creates a lot more family time. Like, organized sports it's a family thing. It takes away from spending time as a family and, going out hiking and biking or whatever it is that you like to do. Is like, that can be a lot more like integrated as a family than, your organized sports a lot of the time.
Yeah, like, we love skiing, and my husband and I talk about what an absurd sport skiing is. Like, it's so expensive and it's so inaccessible, and like 6 people can do it. And, we're on the chairlift. We're like, this sport is really crazy. But we both grew up skiing, so we have, we fell in love with it, but we love it because it's like this weird, like there's not that many sports where you can all do it together as a family. Usually someone's doing the sport and everyone else is spectating. So like we really, we've had such a great time with our kids skiing because we get all this uninterrupted time sitting on the chairlift, just talking to them, and no one's on their phones, and we sit at the lodge and have breakfast, and there's just something from a family perspective that's so great about that sport, with the total caveat, of course, I know it's like absurdly inaccessible for basically everyone.
Right, but there's other things, it doesn't have to be skiing. There's so many other, different things like that, serve the same purpose and all
exactly.
That. So then on the flip side, I want you to a little bit toot your own horn. What do you feel like you've done great as a sport parent? What are you proud of yourself for that you really think has helped your kids, along their journey as an athlete?
Man, I mean, I think the number one thing, and this actually started when our kids were little, is that we have militantly prioritized sleep as parents. When our kids were little, I read this book that was very influential for me in really understanding kids' sleep cycles and the importance of sleep and when they should sleep and how much they should sleep. And it was very prescriptive, and I really I took it to heart and followed it. And that meant we had to say no to things because I was like, my kid has to take a nap. And, but we often got the comment from people like, wow, your kids are so nice and they're so well behaved and they never have tantrums. And I would kind of laugh to myself because I was like, those people think I'm a good parent. And that's really, the jury's out on whether I'm a good parent, but I definitely, what you're seeing is a well-rested kid. Yeah. I don't know whether, I'm sure there's 1,000 ways I've messed up my own kids, but man, my kids are well-rested. And so we've just we prioritize our sleep. Our kids see that we do that. We go to bed early, we get up early, we just make sure we're in bed for 8 hours every night. We really prioritized it when they were little, made sure they knew how to sleep, which I think actually is a skill that has to be learned, how to soothe yourself and go to sleep and be comfortable. So they're good sleepers. And they default to sleeping. They like sleeping. And they know they don't feel good when they don't sleep. So I think that would be the number one thing we've done really well. I love that. And, I will say that, again, everybody is fighting this phone battle in rooms, we're doing that too. It's really hard. We've struggled, up until high school, we made our kids keep their phones out of their room completely. And now we've sort of wavered a little bit. And they use their phone for their alarm, and there's just all these things. So the phone thing is difficult. Yeah. But I still have some controls on my kid's phone. I'm sure she could figure out how to hack them where, after 10 o'clock on weeknights, she can use the alarm, but she can't be on social media. Got it. And on YouTube. So there's, I've created some controls to at least try to sort of help her not be sucked into the internet late at night, or social media in particular. So yeah, I think we've prioritized sleep. And then I think the other thing we've done is control what we can control in terms of food. And so we really prioritize breakfast and dinner because, once you send your kid out the door, who knows what they're going to do? They might go to the corner store and eat Doritos for lunch. You can't control that. They're teenagers, right? We have this ongoing joke in Marin that every kid that gets their driver's license, their first stop is they go to Chick-fil-A in Novato.
I would too.
And yeah, exactly. And so my daughter, funny story, recently got her license, and one of her driving instructors actually takes all kids as part of her driving class through 2 or 3 drive-throughs because she's and she said, sometimes parents have gotten mad at me for taking kids through drive-throughs, but I know that's what kids do first. It's the first thing they do.
Let's learn how to go through a drive-through.
So she teaches them, and I was like, I get it, because I told her, I said, my older daughter, Georgia, first stop, got her license, dropped me off at home, and picked up her friend and went to In-N-Out or something. Yeah. So, totally. So anyway, I think you really can't control a lot about what your kid eats during the day, and I think, again, with that mentality of control what you can control, but man, we make sure our kid leaves the house with a really dense, good breakfast with protein and some fruit, and we really make sure she leaves the house with a dense, home cooked, high quality breakfast. That's one thing we control. And then same thing with dinner. We really try to make sure. And again, we get stuck in the thing where practices from 6 to 8 and when do you eat dinner and whatever, but nevertheless we try to make sure what she does eat is good, and then we let go. We're look, we hope we've done our best to teach her to make good choices during the day, but control what you can control. So those are kind of the two things I think we've done well.
I mean, those are two things that are highly necessary for a happy, healthy, functioning human being, right? Like sleep is probably the number one most important thing. And it is, I really do think that our busy schedules and the phone are the two biggest thing that impacts teenager sleep. Like so many of my coaching conversations with girls, we talk about energy, all right? The sleep is always the first thing. And I'm like, how was your sleep routine? Whatever. Like, what are you doing right before? The answer is almost always, I'm either doing homework right before, or most of the time it's I'm on my phone right before, right? So then it's just, creating a little bit of boundaries around, okay, if you go to bed at 10, you're off your phone at 9, like whatever that may be. But I think those things, obviously for athletic performance, but also for performance in school, for physical health, for mental health, like those two things are an absolute must that any, parent can kind of take control of and teach their kids how to do that, so that they have that habit kind of built in when they go off to college and, beyond that.
I totally agree. And, I don't know because I'm not someone researching this, but my theory is that, everybody's talking about how we have this big, huge teen mental health crisis. I believe that, of course, that's true. The data shows that that's true. And I think a lot of people are pointing their finger at social media. And yes, I think that's also true. But I think underlying all that is kids aren't sleeping enough. Teenagers need to sleep between 8 to 10 hours, closer to 10 if they're youth athletes. No one's sleeping 10 hours. So, I just sort of wonder if we wouldn't see a rapid decrease in those mental health diagnoses and challenges if kids, slept more.
Right.
And I think some school districts are starting to get the message and starting a little bit later. And, there's starting to be some more focus on that, and even at a governmental level. But I think we would really be we'd have a lot of teenagers who feel a lot better and a lot happier if they literally just slept more.
I agree, 100%. Yep. Okay, last big question for you. Your daughter's in the recruiting process, which I know is can be very stressful, can be confusing, can be all of the things, right? What's like one piece of advice or one thing that you're doing that you feel like is helping the process? Like any pieces of advice that you can share to parents who are going through that process?
I would just default back to what I mentioned earlier, seems to be a real challenge, and that's the communication executive function piece. One of the big things that colleges want to see is, are you really into this? Are you really into it? Right. Because I think a lot of kids maybe think they want to be a college athlete, but don't really know what that means, which is one of the reasons why actually a lot of college athletes prefer to recruit kids of athletes, because those kids are more likely to know what it means. Their parents have told them what it is, because it's hard to be a college athlete. It can be really
sport. Yeah.
No. But I think what a lot of kids underemphasize, and kids and parents, because this is done jointly, is how important the communication is. If a coach emails you or texts you, like I've told my kids, I'm like, if you get an email or a text from a coach, like your response is due within 8 hours minimum. Oh, yeah. Sure. And then you actually need to respond in complete sentences. You need to refer to that. You need to be respectful, refer to them as coach blank. A lot of these, it sounds simple, but if you're a coach receiving this and you have two kids are sort of like both talented and you're interested in both kids, but you have one kid who responds to all your emails and messages, knows how to write, that means when you get it, if you recruit that kid, that when they need to fill out the health form or sign the travel form or respond to the text or show up at the meeting, you're not going to have a problem with that kid. And I think people forget about that. They think it's exclusively about like your kid's sporting ability. Yeah. Well, it's not. It is about that. I mean, that's the sort of price of like getting a look. But exactly. All these other things, including how you communicate and how your kid communicates, major. And you'd be, we know a lot of college coaches and their minds are blown. They have these kids who have, their families have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on, training and camps, and they've all traveled, and it's become their family's lifeblood, and, and they're good at the sport, and they're probably going to be able to play in college, and they don't respond to emails.
Yeah.
Like, It's crazy, but it's actually more common than you think. And so I think, to me, that would be my advice to parents and kids who are thinking about that is
Right.
yes, of course, you've got to be good at your sport. Yes, of course, you've got to be a good student. Yes, but make sure that you're tidy around the edges of communication.
Well, I mean, the thing is that there's a lot of very talented athletes, right? There's so many to choose from, and it's like, what's going to separate you from everyone else? That's one of the things, right? Is communication. And I think people forget that because it's just like such a simple, like normal thing. But if a coach, like you said, if a coach has to choose between, a kid that doesn't communicate and a kid that does, it's like the kid that communicates is going to make their life so much easier for the next 4 years. Right?
Yeah.
Like and I love that. And again, it's something that a parent can control, right? I know you can't control your kids, but to help, control that part of the process, that's huge.
Yeah, and it's been one of the things I think has been the best about my daughter's own recruiting process, because I sit with her when she's writing emails and advise her on how to respond.
Right.
But like, how rad for my 16-year-old kid to learn how to appropriately and professionally respond to an email and appropriately and professionally respond to a text message and how to handle yourself on a phone call. Like, forget about sports. Think about how dialed she's going to be when she gets her first job because she actually has had practice doing this stuff. So for me, this is like this unexpected, awesome side thing that's so great for her going through this process. And if she doesn't even end up playing, just doing this is rad for her as a human.
Yeah, I love that. All right, Juliet. Well, you've given us so much of your time, so many awesome, topics during this conversation. Is there anything going on with the Ready State or with you personally that you want to share? And then also, where can people, connect with you and the Ready State?
Well, the best place to follow me is on Instagram at Juliet Starrett, and our website is thereadystate.com. We always have a bunch of cool stuff going on, but we do, my one recommendation is we have a really cool newsletter that Kelly and I write every Friday. It's free, 100% free, called The Ambush. And it's where we share things we find interesting. If we see an article we enjoy, or if we're reading a book that we find interesting, all of it's sort of loosely related to the health and fitness space and sports. But sometimes it's not. It's just sort of interesting information. So awesome. That's another way to just sort of, learn some things and get some interesting info. So check out The Ambush.
Yeah, I get all those emails and they're good. So we'll make sure that we link all that in there. But thanks again for your time. This was such a fun conversation. I feel like I could talk to you for much, much longer than this. But thanks again for coming on. And when your book is out, your youth sports book, we'll definitely have you back on and we'll really dive into that. So I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for having me, and congratulations on, coming back.
Yes.
And thanks for having me as one of your first guests back.
Awesome.
It was awesome to talk to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Juliet.